Charles, it is no longer Sunday, but I think people are still very excited for Monday with Charles. And, with the time zone, we could argue about exactly which day it is with Charles. How are you today?
Oh, it's great to be back with you, and it's great actually to be here. I'm not going to say where I am exactly, but I'm in a place where people are positive, where the economy is booming, where every interaction I have, I walk down the street and people say, "Hello, sir, how are you?" They don't know me. I was in a shopping mall the other day, and I walked up to somebody and I asked for directions, and the guy said to me, "Don't I know you?" And I said, "Excuse me."
What do you
And it
mean?
turned out it was somebody I met before, but out of millions of possible people to have met, this person happened to be in the mall and recognized me. And it's just so unlike New York. I mean, the infrastructure is improving, the streets are clean, the prices are low, the attitudes are non-existent. You go through security lines here, and instead of getting these overpaid, nonchalant, and hostile assholes in the DHS, you get people who are delighted to see you coming into their country. Oh, come this way, sir. Well, you don't need for you to wait in a line. And I'm not flying, premium business or first class. They just, they single me out and say, how can I take care of it? Oh, let me point you in this direction or that direction. And so, I mean, you contrast that with Klaus Anal Schwab, in his recent conference, Fart Fest over there in Davos, where one old fart gets up after the next saying, isn't it delightful, as Klaus said, that, in the future, people won't vote anymore. Elections will be handled by artificial intelligence. Go fucking back to the zoo, you moron. That's not the way it's going to work, at the World Evil Forum. And he makes a big show of walking out of the Argentina leader's speech. And, that guy, he may or may not succeed, and no one has really succeeded in Argentina. The country's gone bankrupt, I believe, at least 5 times so far. But, he's trying to explain to people the important history of what happens when socialism corrupts a rich country. It destroys it. And, he's right. I think the American people understand that Biden and their family are just hopelessly wrong. And these people, why you would thirst for power, having fucked up everything that you've done to date, is beyond me. I mean, why would you want more power? The only reason is so you could protect yourself, I think, from legal liability. So, we'll see what happens today in snowy New Hampshire. But I'm hopeful that, even if somehow Haley wins, which I don't think she will, I'm hopeful that people will now be on to the degree to which Democrats and others can corrupt the electoral process. In a best case, Trump will stomp, Haley, whose latest, complaint that she was unable to compete in a beauty contest. I think she should be very happy that she wasn't allowed to compete in a beauty contest. That'd be like you and me, you being put on the U.S. Olympic basketball team. I mean,
Well, but this
Nikki
was
Haley
interesting, though,
then in a
Charles.
beauty contest.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, she was saying that it was due to her race. I think it has more to do with the fact that she kind of looks like Gonzo the Muppet, and I don't know if that's beauty pageant material.
Yeah, and again, I don't judge people by their looks. I judge them, as Martin Luther King suggests, by the content of their character and by their accomplishments and their sense of humor, and whether
But
they can
wait,
poke fun at themselves,
well,
or
wait.
whether they're stuck-up assholes.
But
I
if
mean,
you
Nikki
were
Haley
charged
has made a
with,
fortune.
but Charles, if you were
I
charged
just
with
finished.
judging a beauty contest, you would be judging people on their looks. And here's another DEI. I'm ugly, but I'm upset that it's got to be racism that I wasn't allowed into the beauty contest. I don't think so.
I mean, she should basically, consider challenging Biden in the Democratic primary. I mean, she's more of a Democrat than a Republican, and frankly, she's made a lot of money on this speaking tour, being the director of companies. She's not qualified to be a director. She's got no business experience, and that's before you get into these allegations, which are not unfounded, that she cheated on her husband while he was serving in the military. I mean, that kind of a person. I mean, people have problems in marriages. I had a difficult marriage. Others around us have had difficult marriages, and that's to be understood. But you don't start running for president of the United States if it's true that she cheated on her husband with two separate people.
Yeah.
And now she's going to try to get ahead. I mean, New Hampshire is about as lily white a state as you get. Yes, there are people of color in New Hampshire, but it's fucking cold as fuck in the winter up there. And I just don't think playing the race card is the smartest thing to do going into this primary.
Yeah.
That's before you question her accomplishments and her talents. Trump has it right. She is not presidential material. I mean, she'd make a great president of some Ivy League college.
Not
but
even.
Maybe.
Well, let me just address one thing on the beauty
president.
pageant before we move off of that, because I just recently, I was kind of shocked to learn this. Nikki Haley is like literally a few weeks older than me. She looks like the mother of somebody I would date, but that aside, she grew up in the United States of America in the same time frame that I did. And I went to public school. There were a number of Indian classmates, and frankly, everybody liked them. Nobody discriminated against any Indian people. They were the smartest people in the class, mostly. And I had a lot of Indian friends growing up. I never experienced any kind of like discrimination against me for being Jewish. I never experienced anybody discriminating against Indian people. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen, but she's acting like she grew up in, 1950 and they wouldn't let her ride the bus.
She's probably got a bottle of Hillary Clinton's hot sauce in her handbag. I mean, Candace Owens, who sometimes I disagree with her, but on this one I agree with her. She points out that Vanessa Williams was Miss America in 1984, which is about the time that
That's exactly
Haley would
right.
be a little bit young.
She's 12.
She would have been a little bit young to compete for Miss America in on a beauty contest then. But anyway, this is yet another. This is she and DeSantis are making Jeb Bush look good. If you remember, Jeb raised $100 million to try to stomp out Trump, and the whole narrative of the mainstream back in 15 and 16 was that Trump was this playboy, dilettante, didn't have the attention span, wasn't a truly loyal American, and Jeb had all this experience governing down in Florida, and came from this patrician family that was born to lead the country. Fucking Trump danced on his grave, and they blew $100 million in February timeframe, and Jeb was out. Now DeSantis is out, and tribute to the art. Great plaudits to the art department for our latest poster. I mean, this DeSantis. In 15 and 16, through the context that I have, I was actually emailing with him to try to get him to focus on the Clinton Foundation, and then I also subsequently made some comments to him about his on paper. This DeSantis guy looks pretty good. I mean, unlike Buttigieg, he wasn't a chauffeur in the war on terror. He was he served. Yeah. And unlike Buttigieg, he's not a fucking kook when it comes to the economy and political issues. But unfortunately, he has a wooden delivery style, and he would have been a lot smarter had he followed the Pompeo path. And I'm not a huge fan of anyone who's been a leader of the CIA, but I mean, I would accept the position of leading the CIA if the remit were I had to wind it down in 12 months. But I certainly wouldn't, be proud to lead the CIA. So Pompeo was smart. He put up his spurs and said, I'm out in this election cycle. I'm young, and he's older than DeSantis. But DeSantis felt he had to, I don't know why, jump into this race and beclown himself. And I think he's finished politically. I just really don't think he can ever. He could be an ambassador. He could be maybe a senator, but he is not going to be able to run for president again.
Oh, Charles. So I got to interrupt you. We've got George's mentally ill brother in the chat, and he's really crossing the line here. I had a tool that was previously able to block him, but it seems like his benefactors or whoever it is that's paying him at the NIH has now done something to get around that. So he's going to continue to make nonsense here in the chat, and we'll just have to deal with him through the legal system. I know he's very afraid of the latest things that I've been doing, so he'll be gone soon. I just want to address this poster for a moment, because a lot of people might not immediately recognize the movie, and there is something quite interesting about this movie. This poster is based on the Ben Affleck movie Gone Girl, which was a big hit at the time. And I think you probably remember a story that I've told you about the time that I was almost the stereographer and maybe even the cinematographer for a very big Robert Zemeckis movie that I had a meeting at Sony that didn't go well. And then years later, the Sony executive came over to myself and Lenny Lipton while we were having lunch at his tennis club and explained to me that I didn't get the movie because his Sony TV was broken. But in the meeting, I had suggested to the Sony executive that we were going to be able to meet the budget that they were talking about by editing the movie in a very particular way using a brand new suite of tools that had just been released by Adobe. And the Sony executive said to me, I'm not going to tell people to edit a movie on Adobe Premiere. And that was the end of the meeting. 1 week after that meeting, there was a gigantic article in Post magazine about how this movie that had just come out that Ben Affleck directed that was killing it at the box office was the very first movie to be completely completed in Adobe Creative Suite. So that was annoying for me.
Yeah, that I'll tell you a Sony story. So for our viewers, I know we're going to go into the First Amendment forum, but back in the 50s, there was a young partner at Dillon Reed where I worked. I think I've told you this story before, but he went out to Japan, maybe even in the early 60s, and he'd been there, going there a few times with a senior partner, and he was asked to give a report to the partners of Dillon Reed about what he saw as the future in Japan. And he waxed eloquent about there's this possibility and that possibility, et cetera, et cetera. Mind you, this is to a group of partners, many of whom who had fought against the Japanese in World War II, and who were none too pleased at the idea of being on the pioneering front of investing there. But he said, "Yeah, I met the most interesting guy I met was this inventor who offered me 10% of his company. I think it was for like 50 or 100,000 bucks, which was a lot of money back then. And that inventor was Akio Morita, the guy who created Sony. So Dillon Reed had a chance to buy 10% of Sony for call it 100,000 bucks in the 60s, and they said nope."
Yeah, that was
a
poor choice.
That was costly,
so to say.
That was a costly move.
Yeah, but we can tell, Charles, that the social engineers are really getting desperate because it's just pathetic. There's no end to what these people will do. And it's not limited to the activity here on Crowdsource the Truth. Everything that's happening with Donald Trump. I see idiots like Norm Eisen, who are almost certainly affiliated with George and his brother through a structure involving the Lawfare Institute and all that kind of stuff. So the goal, of course, is to bring people like George's brother to justice. And what that will mean is exposing their plans to participate in a treasonous effort to undermine the United States government. Charles, it's my sincere hope that evidence and information that we bring out will result in David George Swigert spending the rest of his life in prison, where hopefully he'll contract some kind of disease and be miserable in his last days. But he's here right now disrupting our show, and he can't be blocked. How can that be? How can YouTube allow a criminal scumbag to come here and disrupt what we're doing and violate our First Amendment rights?
Well, one thing to look at, Jason, if you can pull it up, I sent you an article about a new book by Alex Marlow at Breitbart concerning the 2020 election. Book is about to come out, and it recalls he or she's a Breitbart senior person, and this book goes through what happened after the 2016 election. Apparently, a number of people, high up people at Google and elsewhere, resolved to never let this happen again. That is to say, Trump defeat the establishment's choice to be president. And it relates first-person accounts, from Breitbart and other places of how Google took the search results Breitbart was doing a lot of reporting on Biden, and in the 20 cycle, and they just abruptly made a decision at Google that if you do a search result for Breitbart and Biden, you'll come up with nothing. The traffic for Breitbart went down by 99.7%. So when you
Wow.
think about, the idea I thought behind the internet was to create a more robust marketplace for free exchange of ideas. Instead, the pipes have been clogged. So the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters, et cetera. Yeah, there are many independent voices, but if the pipes make a decision, so none of your work, none of my work, none of, let's say, Miranda Devine or other people's work is actually going to reach the mass audience, then it's possible for technocrats to really shade the quote debate that may exist between different different actors about the best path forward. This is a book that goes into that in some depth. I haven't read it yet, but just looking at the summary, that will provide potentially, Jason, you a way of moving into the timeline with what Marlowe alleges was happening, with what certainly has happened against us. I mean, in 17, when we started, in June of 17, we were on a rapid upward trajectory where our shows were getting, I think the most we ever got was like 65,000 views. And now, of course, you can't say today there's less of an appetite for the kind of stuff that we do. There's got to be more of an appetite. More in the beginning, we were pioneers pointing things out, and people in the deep state just didn't want what we've been pointing out to be circulating broadly. And now I think it's accepted wisdom. I mean, the coverage in the mainstream press of the various primaries has been, again, fatuous or wrong. Trying to hype up the idea that Trump wouldn't win. I mean, Trump is fucking, Superman at this point, and Biden is stupid man.
Yeah.
I mean, the best thing Biden could do right now is pardon himself and his family and the Clintons and the Obamas. Get the fuck out of town. That's the smartest thing he could do right now. Because then
Now, wait,
the
you mentioned that
Democrats.
in an email. I got a question about it, though, Charles, because wouldn't that differ from what Nixon did with, rather, what Ford did with Nixon? Because they haven't been accused of anything. Wouldn't they be admitting to crimes?
No. So in the case of Nixon, what happened, it doesn't matter whether they admit if they're pardoned. In the case of Nixon, they had drawn up articles of impeachment, but not adopted them. They hadn't gone through a process of voting to impeach him. Ford pardoned Nixon prospectively for any potential crimes. So it was the pardon power of the president has never really been adjudicated. And so there are open questions about how far you can go. It seems clear to me, and again, I'm not a lawyer, it seems clear to me that a president can only pardon potentially himself or others for federal, for offer pardons against federal crimes. I don't think a president could pardon himself or anyone else against state and local crimes. So again, what you're trying to do here, you're sitting in the center of ground zero of desperation, right? Trump, who you thought you were going to put in a box, seems to defy every approach that's being taken. Jack Smith's case is in trouble. Of course, the New York case is in trouble. The Georgia case is in trouble. And before long, I hope people are going to contrast the guff that Trump took, including an impeachment, vote, for merely suggesting to another world leader that world leader, specifically Zelensky, stamp out corruption in Ukraine, something that Obama's leadership and even Bush's leadership had tried to encourage Ukraine to this whatever it's called, is it Nabucco or whatever it's called in Ukraine, the thing that's tied to our FBI.
Oh,
Nabu. There was the big
Nabu.
Yeah. There's a big concern that who knows what the FBI was up to and is up to in Ukraine, but both Republican and Democrat presidents prior to Trump had encouraged Ukraine to stamp out corruption. So that's all Trump was doing, and validly conducting foreign policy, speaking to Zelensky. I don't know exactly what he said. No one, I guess, knows exactly what he said. But the point is Trump was entirely within his purview to say, listen, when you stamp out corruption, as I imagine he would have said, if you find evidence of corruption touching high American political officials, don't be intimidated. Go for it, expose it. And so Trump does that. And in contrast, Biden and his team, likely involving Obama and Clinton and Kerry and many others, Romney perhaps, McConnell, and many others have been saying, listen, Trump is a danger to this country.
Yeah.
And it's okay to use federal funds to whip up these prosecutions in states and cities against Trump. So we stop him from being legitimately elected as president in 2024. This is outrageous behavior. Now, if it was just George Soros doing this, but private people with their own money, it's nothing wrong with that, assuming they, are within campaign contribution limits of doing that stuff validly. But to have our federal government use taxpayer funds to whip up prosecutions against a former president, including the raid on Mar-a-Lago and other things, is outrageous. And at this stage, Trump, if he wants to win, he can't go and do Trump light. He's got to go and say, listen, this is a grievous harm has been committed by the Biden administration, like the other actors, against the American Constitution. And the Biden administration has failed to uphold the Constitution. We will, and that is going to involve a policy of retribution and intense examination. All crimes, particularly federal crimes, that have been committed by the corrupt Biden regime are going to be exposed, and the actors, the most serious actors, are going to be strenuously prosecuted, including perhaps going to prison for the rest of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
Or worse, if it's treason.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear about, I'm president and I can't really protect myself in 2025. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. We're almost out of time here in our preview leading up to the sponsor exclusive segment in the First Amendment Forum. People can join us for that on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Charles, when it comes to computers, I'm like a Boy Scout. I got a lot of different redundant methods, and I forgot about one of my good ones that we've knocked George's stupid brother out of the chat. He was really saying some despicable things that show the audience and the public what this deep state is all about. Going back to Trump, you said he needs to not do Trump light. I've been detecting lately, Charles, that what we have right now is a different Trump than what we had in 2016 and even 2020. It's almost like, I'm not a whiskey drinker, but this is like a oak barrel aged Trump, where the Trumpiness has gotten even more Trumpy, and it's got legs now, and the note, it's just crisp in the nose when you got a little Trump snifter there, and he's just like brooding and ready to smash these guys. So I think we have a more just like percolated version of Trump now. And he seems like he's going to be just knocking everybody out. It's like, these are historic victories. Nikki Haley is going to be made a joke tomorrow.
Yes, Nikki Haley. It's almost like, even, when you're discussing that, I was reminded of the great movie Sideways, and that the way in which they demolished those wine snobs out there in Santa Barbara. That was funny.
You going to get mad if I order
Merlot?
Yeah.
That scene was one of the top 10 of all time. It was hilarious.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely an excellent actor. Paul Giamatti. That was one of his first movies. I forget this other actor's name. He was
Do you know who his father is?
Giamatti? No.
Do you know who his father is? Yeah.
No.
His father was the president of Yale.
Whoa. Interesting.
And they're now talking about pushing the idiot who I interacted with, the dean of Yale Law School, Dean Pickle. They're now saying that she might make a great president of Yale. I mean, this, wow.
It's interesting. Gherkin is such a strange name, Heather Gherkin. That was the name of the Russian separatist leader who discovered the crashed Malaysian Air flight in Ukraine and revealed that all of the bodies had been dead for weeks and were rotting. His last name was Gherkin.
Well, actually, isn't it the name of a pickle?
it is, making it a weird thing to be named after. But also,
exactly. Dean Pickle.
yeah, I don't know. They're picking all kinds of stupid people to be president, including Joe Biden. Although in an interview I saw earlier today, Trump predicted that Biden would drop out. I think that might be right. We'll talk about it more in 5 minutes.
For the reason I said,
He's what?
He's got to pardon himself. He's got to pardon himself and pardon the Obamas. Forget the
Before
Clintons. He's got to do that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about that in just 5 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. You can join us and follow on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. It's the most economical way to support Crowdsource the Truth. And when you see repulsive, sickening individuals like George's brother in the chat, I want to take a minute to talk about this, not to curse about him and all that, but Charles, you and I are trying to get to the truth, trying to help people understand how they can interpret this information so that they can improve their lives, be well informed to protect their families. And these people who come here, specifically George's brother, he's such a despicable character because we're working hard to make things and do things to help people. And his focus is only to destroy that, to make the world around him and us and everyone worse. He is such a sick, disgusting waste of life. I can really understand why George Henry would have punched you in the face every single day. And the only reason I'm sad that George Henry is rotting in hell right now is because he's not on earth to punch David some more. And we'll be back in just 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody, for